Hi Lana, welcome once again to Lana's Coach. So if you're a teacher or you're done maybe with your coursework and you're planning to proceed to your teaching practice, then you are in the right place. I'm going to take you through this particular topic of scheme of work so that you understand how to create one. And before that, I'm also going to show you the main concept of a scheme of work. Why should you have one, right? So ideally, scheme of work in the teaching practice helps you as a trainer to maybe lay down your thoughts in a systematic manner. So if you're joining us for the very first time, kindly feel welcome, and if you have not subscribed, take a second or two so that you become part of this particular community. So let's look at the definition, right? So it can be defined as a carefully arranged and systematic program of action for achieving a goal. So this, you'll realize that this systematic program is some set of laid out thought in terms of what learning outcomes, right, that you need to achieve. We can also look at it as an analysis or summary, right, in some kind of an outline form. I also want you to understand that it is a summarized focus of work that you as an instructor considers adequate to cover within a given period of time that is already set within the syllabus. So it's kind of a guiding document with well stipulated time frame. So it is therefore an interpretation of the syllabus. So if I can underline this, so for us to come up with a scheme of work, then you need a what? You need to have some kind of a syllabus. So you realize that wherever you're teaching, they'll always provide you a syllabus based on the what? The industry that you're in. So if you're in IT, for example, like myself, you'll have the syllabus for IT. If you're in medical field and so on, right? So therefore, it's a long-term plan which can range from few weeks to several months. So ideally, scheme of work should cover right from the time you start teaching until the time you assess the students, right? So it contains the instructor's plan, right, that will enable him or her organize for the training. So I think that is well understood. So we understand what scheme of work is. So important considerations to be made in preparation of a scheme of work. First, understanding the syllabus. I'll still underline the word syllabus, right? So you need to understand the syllabus because it's where you're going to generate your scheme of work from. Then also you need to come up with the order of topics and subtopics from the syllabus to the scheme of work. I'll show you step by step of how you can do this. And of course, you're going to refer to some resource materials, right? So what we call or refer to as reference materials. And of course, the nature of examinations, right? How are you planning to examine your students? Of course, we have those continuous assessments, we have practical tests and so on. Then you also need to factor in the time. Time is very, very important, right? And of course, you can build it from the previous year's experiences. So importance of a scheme of work to an instructor such as you. It helps determine in advance lesson requirements. Now, these lesson requirements are quite a lot in terms of maybe the venue where the lesson is going to be conducted. That is very important. The teaching aids, right? The teaching aids that you are going to require, the reference materials, the time frame, right? And even the content is very, very important. So it also helps you develop a logical sequence of knowledge and skills, right? It also provides a record of learning activities for future reference. Remember, once you have generated a scheme of work, you can always, maybe after 2 years, maybe peruse through and see what you taught in a particular duration. So achieving the set of objectives can be implemented using a scheme of work in a given period. And of course, it enables you have some kind of standard training material or training content that you can use within your classes or when you're executing your lessons. So let's just maybe start by understanding the components of a scheme of work. Now, there are two main components of a scheme of work. First, these are the preliminary or administrative details. These one include your name, the class name, the date when this lesson is going to, all these. Then you have the major components. So these are now ways of how you're going to divide your scheme so that you capture the relevant content. We are going to look at that. Now, what are these administrative details? As I've mentioned, it includes the name of your institution, very important. It also includes the class level. It could be a certificate or a diploma. And of course, it includes the subject that you're going to teach, the term, right? Very important. And of course, the date of preparation, date of revision, syllabus topic, and syllabus subtopic. So take note of these administrative details. When you're preparing your scheme of work, you need to include them. Then the other components are the major components within the lower part of the scheme of work. So you have to indicate which week are you scheming for, isn't it? Is it week 1? Is it week 2? And of course, the period number, maybe the number of hours, for instance, the periods, right? And lesson title, you have to indicate there, objectives, key points, application activities, references, and aids, remarks, and date when this particular lesson was taught. So having said that, let's take a look at how we can now create our scheme of work. So kindly, as we proceed to creating our scheme of work, note that you need to have a syllabus. And after the scheme of work, I'm going also to show you how to create a lesson plan, maybe in our next video. So let's have a look at a typical example of how to come up with a scheme of work. Very good. So you can see I've now opened a sample document of a scheme of work. I've actually created one. So I'll just maybe, because of time, just maybe highlight some main elements that you need to understand. Remember, we said that scheme of work has two different parts. The upper part is actually the preliminary or administrative details, right? The ones that are in bold, right? And of course, even this one we can add in bold. Then this one at the bottom here, these ones are the major elements that you need to actually put into consideration. So what is the first administrative detail that you need to fill is your name, right? Your official name, and of course indicate the number of students in your class. And also, if you're a practicing teacher, then you need to have the administration number, right? So here it can either be administration number or employee number. So if you are employed, now you are working for a particular institution, you can always change this to your employee number. That is after you have graduated from teaching practice, right? Institution name is where you are actually doing your teaching practice, or rather where you are teaching. And of course, the date of preparation, you can always indicate when you prepare. Now, let me mention something about date of preparation. Now, when you're preparing a scheme of work, it should be prepared at least 1 week before you commence teaching, right? So that you have a logical segmentation of how you're going to maybe create the various lesson plans. So if you, let's say for example, you create a scheme of work in the middle when you have already started teaching, then you're not going to get everything right. So it's always important that you create it way back before you start your lessons. Very, very important. Then here you indicate the subject. As you can see, my subject is database management. At the level here that I'm teaching is diploma. So I'm guided by the syllabus of this particular unit, right? Then you can see the syllabus subtopic is database management system, and the subtopic is database design concept, right? So therefore, those are actually the main administrative details. You can even state the date of revision, but rarely will you have that. So these ones are the main ones. Now let's look at the major elements, right? So the major elements here, as you can see, represent the week, period, lesson title, specific objectives, key points, application, our activity, reference, teaching aids, and remarks, right? So let me just show you what I did in my part. So I assumed that this particular lesson, or rather I'm going to teach this particular lesson in week 6, right? So that's where you place 6. That's where you place 6, and then period. I'm going to take a maximum, maybe 2 hours. So I'll indicate period 1 and period 2. That is, right? If you're just going to take 1 hour, you can say what period 1, right? So lesson title, you have to indicate the lesson title. Concepts of database design. Now lesson title can always be derived from subtopic, right? So you can just come up with a very good, like this is database design concept. So you can see concepts of database design is one and the same thing. Now specific objectives. How do you kickstart your objectives? So you have to have this statement. By the end of the lesson, remember it is the lesson, we are dealing with the lesson here, right? By the end of the lesson, the learner should be able to, then you list the various objectives. Like for example, the first objective that I want to my learners to achieve is number 1, define data abstraction and schemas. Are we together? Now, what are the key points within this objective? Now, key points are the main points that must be taught. Like if you're teaching the definition of data abstraction and schemas, you have to emphasize on them. So the key points here, first you have to give them some kind of subheading, or you can put it in bold, like this is definition of the terms abstraction and schemas, because I'm defining here. Then now the main points are conceptual diagram. When I'm defining this, I also need to mention relational database and of course database object, right? So that is just one example of how to come up with key points for your objective. Now what about application and activities? Now we have to focus on the learners. What are the learners' activities? What are they going to do, right? So here's where you are going to employ different teaching methods, right? Like for example, you can see for us to achieve this first objective, we are going to use the through question and answer. This is a teaching technique, question and answer. Yeah, so we're going to use this to reinforce the understanding of the learner towards defining the concept of what? Data abstraction. So through question and answer, define the terms data abstraction and schemas. Remember, we have placed the word learners here, isn't it? So learners, through question and answer, define the terms data abstraction and schemas, right? Then on the reference and teaching aids, where are you going to get this concept or content from? You need to have a book. You can use a website. So whatever material that you use to get or to refer to this particular concept, you need to put it here. So as you can see, I use this particular book. Kindly use the APA reference style, right, when you are actually indicating the book that you used, right? So apart from that, you can also indicate the teaching aids that you're going to use. So it depends with the nature of the lesson. The nature of the lesson simply means how are you going to deliver the lesson? What are the teaching aids or resources that you're going to use, right? So if they are practicals, of course, you'll need to use practical teaching aids. Are we together? So here I can use handouts. I can use a poster, as you can see, poster showing types of schemas. Remember, I'm defining the schemas, right? And of course, here you are going to mention the remarks and date taught, whether it was successful, the challenges, but rarely will you have it, but indicate the date when this is going to be taught. Now, that is the first objective. You can see there are 3. Now, a good scheme of work should at least have 3 objectives. not less than 3 objectives, right? So the second objective here, as you can see, is identify types of what? Data types, right? So you remember the period is 2 hours, so I can actually handle these objectives, so ensure that the time frame is actually adequate. Identify types of database structure. You can see the key point here, identification of database structures with the sub key points, right? Application, another teaching strategy. So here I use, the learners should use through think, pair and share, should attempt to do what? Identify types of database structures. Of course, I can replicate that particular teaching, reference material, but it's not really necessary once you have placed it here. As long as it's the same book, no need, right? So if you realize that maybe there's some additional teaching aids that you omitted up here, you can as well mention them, but it's always good to have them all together, right? So the third one is to explain basic database operations, right? So you can see the main key points here, and you can see the strategy, teaching strategy that they are going to use. So they are going to do a mind map, right, on how to operate a database. So this one attempts or allows the students to brainstorm on how a database operates, right? Then a good scheme of work also should have an assignment, right? So ensure that your scheme of work, when you're creating it, it has some assignments. So you can see mine, discuss 5 database models used in modern enterprise. So this is just a sample, a scheme of work that actually comprises of the main or major elements that you have so far mentioned. So for those of us who are still or are actually practicing or doing some teaching practice, I hope this information is going to be helpful. If also you are planning to do some kind of teaching, then this will help you a lot. And for those of us who went or are already teaching, but you're wondering how to go about this scheme of work, then I hope it's going to be helpful. If it is so, just click on the like button, and always don't forget to subscribe. So in our next lesson, or maybe you can always check within this channel for how to create a lesson plan. Remember, lesson plan is generated from what? From a scheme of work. So let's meet in our next video.